Meanwhile, over in Milan, they seem to have slipped on a banana skin. They were 1-0 up against Feyenoord within a minute. Andy,
40 seconds.
Yeah, 40 seconds. Within a minute, how on earth did they throw that one away?
I guess it's one of these recurring questions that we get from Milan this season, in that they have looked imperious, actually, in some of the biggest matches that they've played. And so for that reason, I guess when they get Feyenoord in the playoff round, and remember they could have got Juventus, which would have been huge, because if the draw had gone a different way, you would have had PSV versus Feyenoord and Juventus versus Milan, which would have been extraordinary. But I did just wonder, Feyenoord not having their greatest season, of course. They've been a perennial title challenger in recent years, but they sat in the coach, Brian Prisker, going back a couple of weeks. And you look at it now and you think, could they have done with, I don't know, more of a challenge is the right, more of a name, really, as their opposition to really raise themselves. Because we've seen in their biggest moments, they can do stuff. They won away at the Bernabeu, for goodness sakes, this season. There's what, 2 teams have done that? Them and Barcelona this season. So we know they're capable of it. But I thought their performance in the away leg in De Kuip really set them back. Now, obviously, it didn't set them back as much as it would result-wise in when it was still away goals, because then they would have found it really, really difficult. And, even going ahead and getting a second goal after Feyenoord had equalised wouldn't have made any difference, because they would have gone out on away goals. But I think that the whole approach really was quite flat in the away leg. You saw Mike Maignan making a really uncharacteristic mistake to let in the goal from Igor Paschal, and it was always the sense that they weren't quite sharp enough, they weren't quite on it really. But then, as you say, they respond brilliantly. Santi Jimenez, who's just left Feyenoord, and of course you don't get being cup tied in the Champions League anymore, scores and is very apologetic for doing so after 40 seconds. And the kind of goal that you think they've really needed, that one that, it's just an absolute poacher's goal. And that's what he's so good at as well. But I think when you talk about how it went wrong from there, you can't look really beyond the Theo Hernández red card, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's a tale. He gets a second yellow card for simulation.
Yeah.
What can you say about that, David?
Well, his first yellow was avoidable as well. So, even focusing on the red card incident as well, that was just a nothing challenge in the centre of the park that got him the yellow card. And it's something, look, I really like Theo Hernández. Absolutely cracking player, archetype middle footballer, technical, physical, brilliant. But sometimes you question his head sometimes. I just think some of his snap decision making and some of his temperament on the field is a concern to me. And if he's one of your leaders, there's always that little bit of, doubt there. And I think we saw that come to the fore here with that. And I thought, I wasn't impressed by Milan up until the red. I thought they were just starting to regress a little bit and playing a little bit too cagey. But the red card just completely set the panic in. And you could see it filtered through to all of his teammates as well. He'd let down grossly, I think. I think Conceição's subs were not good enough as well. To take off Jimenez, to take off Pulisic, to be left with João Felix on the field, I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me. I don't know. That doesn't say to me, right, we're going to see this tie out. That doubt is sown in there, I think.
I would agree. I think the subs are hit and hope, quite simply. And when you look at the major criticism of Conceição from when he was back at Porto, and remember recently Jorge Jesus said in an interview, his old adversary said what he did at Porto was perform miracles. Now, I wouldn't particularly disagree with that, but if we're looking at that criticism of him, I think that's probably borne out in this game. Also, I think, though, it's something that goes way beyond the coach, because, of course, they've had 2 coaches now, 2 Portuguese coaches, very different temperaments and tactical outlooks in Paulo Fonseca and Sergio Conceição. They've both struggled. And I think it goes back to, I don't want to pin it all on Theo Hernández, but what David said when he said, if he's one of your leaders, maybe there's an issue. And really, the club, by investing so much to retain Theo Hernández and Rafa Leão, it seems as if they've created this problem, really, because these are meant to be the two beacons leading forward, world-class players leading forward this Milan team that can grow around them. But unfortunately, if there's one thing that's as clear as that they keep doing well in the big games and losing against the slightly less vaunted opposition, or not winning against slightly less vaunted opposition, it's the fact that they've invested so much, not just materially, but I think in terms of power in Theo and Rafa, and they've both frequently let the team down this season. They've been way, way too inconsistent. Now, I thought it was interesting that Sergio Conceição thought, right, I'm going to stick up for Theo Hernández after this. And he said, look, he's done loads of great things for the club. And I think, especially for such a hothead as him, to find that moment to say, okay, we've still got a chance to get something out of this season. Because, you know, you've looked at the table for a while in Serie A and they're a bit adrift. They're actually only 5 points short of the top four with a game in hand. But they're going to need to improve a lot. And there's traffic as well between them and the top four to do that. So it's a difficult situation for Conceição, David, because he must be tearing his hair out, just as Fonseca was, about how Theo and Rafa just do their own thing and, you know, are not locked in and focused all the time. On the other hand, he really needs them for the run-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they're two-star players. I don't think there's anyone bigger. I know they brought in Jimenez, but it's still going to be down to Theo and Rafa Leão, I think, to lead this club going forward. Whether they have the right temperament to take them to that next level, to win, Serie A, to get them further in the Champions League. I don't know how long Rafa Leão is also going to be there as well. That's going to be another thing in the summer. It's kind of like, right, maybe, we've gone as far as we can with him. We might use the money from the sale that he could he could bring in, the money that he could bring in to reinvest in the squad and build it a certain way. Because I also wonder about Conceição and how he sets up his teams and how he has his teams, whether moving forward, Leão is the right player for his system. I see Jimenez as a player for him, absolutely. I don't see the João Felix signing. Just really puzzled me as well. That didn't make any sense to me. And obviously we can't dispute his talent, his ability, of course. But we've had this discussion a million times about João Felix. But I think from Theo, you've got to expect better. He's not a 21-year-old kid who's out on loan. He's a leading player, or should be now.
Feyenoord, interestingly enough, though, are about to appoint Robin van Persie as their new coach. It begs a question: why did they sack the former coach that you mentioned a moment or two ago?
Well, they're miles off it in the Eredivisie, and really the last couple of seasons under Arne Slot have made it really difficult for anyone to follow. We talked about Slot following Klopp as being a hard act to follow and a thankless task, but whereas he's made quite a seamless transition, of course, less people have thought about how do you replace Arne Slot. It's very difficult. He did an incredible job at Feyenoord. Of course, lesser resources than both PSV and Ajax. But of course, this is the Champions League for you. It is a cup competition. And if you look at the fact that, say, Dortmund, for example, who've gone through to the last 16 without really any alarms, they've been way, way off it in the league. That's a really good reminder of that. And Feyenoord have kind of almost used this template, I suppose. I mean, they're 12 points off a Champions League place. They are not making the Champions League again next season unless they win this competition, really. That's where they are. And that led to Brian Priske getting binned. Now, Pascal Boschart has done a really good job in a really short time, especially looking after these two games. They can always do something at home, really, like a Celtic. De Kuip is an absolutely fearsome place to go and visit, and Bayern found that earlier in the season. Of course, Bayern lost 3-0 there, going back just last month, actually. But considering they lost Jimenez as well since the group stage, because he went to Milan, of course, to roll over his new club is a very, very impressive effort. Now, there's still quality in there, and I suspect because they won't make the Champions League in the summer, they will lose some of that quality. Look at Hansko, who is a great defender, and I think a few Italian clubs would have him. Of course, Atletico Madrid were trying to piece together a deal for him last summer as well. Haj Musa as well, I think could go a very, very long way. I really liked him in the Champions League this season. So maybe Van Persie is a kind of nod to that, because he's done okay at Heerenveen without actually really tearing up trees so far. He's been interesting so far, but maybe it's a little bit earlier getting the Feyenoord job than he would have expected. But maybe that's a nod towards their new reality. I guess the plus for him is the deeper they go into the Champions League, he'll have more money to do the rebuild.
What's puzzled me, Andy, though, is the club had Van Persie in-house. They let him go to Heerenveen, and then suddenly now, half a season in, and look, I'm not saying he's done terribly at Heerenveen at all, but like I say, I think it's been inconsistent. It's been okay. The decision to bring him in now, it's just a bit strange. It doesn't bode well for who's making the decisions behind the scenes.
No, it doesn't. I think that's fair to say. I mean, he's sort of a fan appeaser in a way, isn't he? Because he's someone who is known and loved there. Finished his career there. His son's there as well. So, you know, there is that really, really strong link there. But like I said, I think it's because the job has changed so much since the start of the season, which underlines exactly how difficult it is to follow Slot, and the fact that he managed to keep them competitive last season was a really incredible effort.